welcome back again. I am Alyse Diamond, and I am reading my memoir, Raised by Narcotics, Growing Up in the Opioid Epidemic. Today we're on chapter 3, called Opidemic, and I'm just going to get right into it. You know those fun mashups they make up for celebrity couples? Bennifer, Brangelina, Kimye? Let me share a fun mashup you may not have heard of. Opidemic. So what the hell does opidemic mean? If you live in Utah, you know exactly what it means. And it's about as stupid as the combined celebrity names making their rounds across social media. Opidemic is derived from opioids and epidemic, a fun little catchy word to help us millennials wrap our heads around what's happening in our own backyard. An opioid epidemic. Because we were not capable of understanding that otherwise. Not quite as fun as Brangelina, lol. What is with this generation? I wonder who decided to coin that word, because I would love to understand what went through their head when they decided it was okay. Let's have a conversation, you and me, because there's an entire website dedicated to this word that you created, and I can't decide if I hate it or if I wish I had thought of it first. I should give credit where credit is due, and you now have my full and complete attention. The very first time I saw a billboard for it, 2016, I think, I was triggered with a flood of emotion, and all I wanted was a safe space to hide, exactly as you may have intended. Having a meltdown while driving down I-15 was not an option. I think my husband was in the car with me, and let me tell you how hard it was trying to explain my sudden silence to a man who knows me very well and knows when I've been set off internally, like a little bomb imploding inside my organs. He can hear it, smell it, see it. He knows. Nothing, dear, was the best I could muster. But I kept seeing the image in my head and all the other images that went along with it. You guys are good, and I hope it's helped someone. But billboards are probably as effective as the "you should fear death" billboards to instill the fear of God and thus the belief into you. Because not believing in God is a sin, and some billboard is going to convince me of that. When I see those God-fearing billboards, I can't help but think of the Davy Jones monster from Pirates of the Caribbean asking the crew, "Do you fear death?" It's a little too late for that question to help the members of my family who are now buried 6 feet under. I suppose they didn't fear death, but I'll never get the chance to ask them. I'm actually pro-opidemic, if that surprises anyone. At least the term. I was all about that message, but what I really felt was angry. Angry that it wasn't there when I needed it most. Where the hell were your giant posters when I was going through hell with my family? At the time, I thought whoever came up with those slogans and billboards was also going through hell with their own family. But I've since learned that it's actually run by the Utah Department of Health, which includes doctors, bureaucrats, and real people struggling with their families. People who are having to watch patients, loved ones, and friends die. No matter how the opioid epidemic touched our lives, it is affecting all of us. In hindsight, this situation is a terrible bitch. You can't help but think about all the things you wish you could have done differently, things you realize only after the fact. I wish I had written this book sooner. I wish I could get over myself and the misconceptions everyone has about me and my lifestyle, and just throw these words onto a page so that people could get the help they need sooner rather than later. Too late for my family, too late for their family. All they are anymore are statistics. What good are statistics? Before we go any further, we need a little history. So what is an opioid anyway? First, we need to understand that we have opioid receptors all throughout our bodies. They exist all throughout our nervous system and gastrointestinal tract, which basically translates to our brain, spine, and intestines. This actually accounts for a large percentage of our body. Second, opioids are substances that reduce pain and alter the reactions of these receptors. It's important to note that opioids should only be taken in the short term, because over time, our bodies can become dependent on them and no longer respond properly without them. Thank you, WebMD. Science is incredible. It's just mind-blowing to think how medicine interacts with every single tiny little piece of our bodies. That we even have such a substance to relieve our own physical discomfort is just astounding, let alone the fact that we can understand, with a simple internet search, how it all works. If you have time, totally Google that shit. It's crazy. Opioids themselves are not the problem. Much like the sentiment that guns don't shoot people, people shoot people. Drugs don't kill people, people kill people. Yet we blame opioids for the death of over 125 people each day across this nation. That amounts to tens of thousands of deaths per year. But doctors and policymakers still can't agree on the statistic because there's disagreement as to what constitutes a drug overdose as opposed to, let's say, a stroke. We, all of us, doctors, patients, pharmacy techs, and particularly in regard to this book, the medical industry as a whole makes a choice every single day that affects so much more than just ourselves. I have to ask, who's responsible? The drugs are not going to hop into your body and kill you. A venomous spider might bite you and kill you, but drugs can't do that. Only you and your doctors and the folks at Big Pharma can make the decision that you are going to become a drug addict. It's in their best interest to become an addict, and they will try to convince you that it's in your best interest too. There is quite a bit of psychological manipulation at play here. It's a long and disgusting chain of that old childhood game of telephone. You know, the one where children stand in a line, side by side. The first child whispers something into the next child's ear, and as they continue down the line, the message becomes morphed into something else entirely. The original message most likely gets lost altogether. Now, let's say that a pharmaceutical company creates several different drugs. Some of these drugs take off, and doctors can sell them very easily because, well, they work. Here, take my money. Other drugs, for whatever reason, aren't as appealing to doctors, so along the message line, not only are doctors being persuaded psychologically via sales pitches and seminars that they may be a bit misleading, but they are also incentivized to create a catchier message to sell more drugs. This is how the opioid epidemic began. Before the pills ever reach your medicine cabinet, an entire line of misleading, manipulative, and incredibly persuasive incentives are built into the very foundation to make sure that you too can become a drug addict. Who can you even trust? Perhaps the telephone game is a terrible metaphor. I think of it as a line of people the drug itself must pass through, and along the line, each person is given a different incentive to tweak the message to make the drug seem more appealing, using catchy phrasing to mislead you, and even your doctors. They are, after all, the very people putting it into your hands. They need to be persuaded before you are that it's worth the investment. Now let's start to think of this as an investment, a product. Don't you want to invest in your own health? See, there it is. The trust is so important. But when it comes right down to it, sometimes you can't even trust yourself. And I know from personal experience, trusting your doctor is literally putting your life into their hands. But you wouldn't put your life into, say, your stylist's hands, would you? No, that's stupid. All they know how to do is cut hair. I'm a licensed cosmetologist, by the way, so this is a fun example for me. As a cosmetologist, we were trained less in how to cut or style hair. That all comes from on-the-job experience, and more on how to sell product. Our job requirements included how much we had to sell in solid numbers. Our performance was based on how well we moved products off our shelves and pushed it into the hands of our clients. Let me tell you, your doctors are trained to do the exact same thing with medication. Every single clinic or hospital in the country bases the performance of their entire staff on their ability to put drugs into your hands. Because drugs are their product, their entire job is to convince you that you need it. Let me give you a bit of an example. Our jobs as stylists was to use the product in your hair while you were sitting in our chairs and while we were doing our thing. We would be actively trying to convince you of just how amazing the product was. And of course, we were paid a commission on every product that walked out the door. No difference with doctors, none. Perhaps they are paid to promote the product versus making a commission on a per item basis, but that is the only distinction to be made. This example makes me feel a little sick because of my experience in beauty school and actually being handed little slips of paper from our instructors with the big RX in the corner. They very literally taught us how to prescribe solutions for different types of hair our clients had. Let me ask you this though. When did your hair ever need those products? I can tell you that aspect of my job was incredibly difficult for me as a stylist, and I was just a stylist. Can you even imagine the pressure doctors are under and the ethics involved in working in the business of killing you? I can't. I can now, actually. I'm starting to sound like a hippie out of one of those documentaries that I love to watch. I'm not trying to scare you. I'm trying to educate you and put the choices back into your hands, not in the hands of doctors and pharmaceutical reps. You're going to feel trapped, pressured, and you should, because it's your life and your health on the line. You must find a way to educate yourself. The thing is, none of this is a secret. I'm not blowing anyone's mind by saying this stuff. This is the truth we have all come to know and somehow accept. I just want to ask you, are you really okay with it? Because I'm not. That's why I'm writing, because I'm not okay with it. When I got swept up in it, I was just a child, trusting everyone around me, not knowing any better. But now that I'm an adult, my biggest fear is that my children will be too trusting. It cost my ignorant family their lives, and I didn't know any better to help them stop. Conversely, I now trust no one at all. I think everyone around me has a shady agenda. I just have to choose which agenda I'm okay being a part of. That's not a happy existence, but that is the definition of existing. You get to choose your demons. You will die someday. The question is, how much control do you want over how it happens? As you may have gathered, I'm a huge proponent of choices. If your goal in life is to be a happy addict on the streets with no family or money, and you like it that way, who's to say that's bad? If you're not inflicting pain onto others, no harm, no foul. Am I right? If you want to do that with your life, own it. You be you. But what I know about human nature is that while there might be the occasional oddball who wants that kind of life, truly wants it, the other 99% of the human population wants something better. We all have dreams, goals, hopes. We all want something better than what we have right now. So I ask the question, what the hell are we doing to each other? So that's the end of chapter 3. Ooh. The next one is chapter 4, called Family Tree. Okay, I think this particular chapter needs some fact checking. Keep in mind, I had never been to college before this, and although I did go to high school and learn how to write a paper, I did not know how to cite sources or do research properly. So this chapter needs a lot of fact checking. I personally now work at an OBGYN clinic as a medical assistant. That's where my life is now. And I do still kind of feel this way about the medical industry in the United States. it still seems ass backwards to me. And I think there's still a lot I don't know or don't understand. I'm not a doctor. I don't know what their incentives are for pushing drugs. I don't know if they get kickbacks, which would be incredibly illegal. I don't know. So I have to be totally honest about not knowing the real trail. I think it did come out with the Sackler family. In other parts of the country, we have documentaries now that a lot of my friends were pinging me with after I wrote and released my book, being like, Alyse, look at this. Look what just came out. Talk about the opioid epidemic and how it really started. It was a very big deal 6-7 years ago, before the COVID pandemic. And there were a lot of shady practices in a lot of different parts of the country. Utah, unfortunately, was one of them. I did read a statistic, and I can't remember exactly what it was, but Utah, the number one death for a time was overdose or something like that to opioids. Or they had a number one spot. Utah did. My home state had a number one spot on a statistic with opioids. That's heartbreaking. That statistic literally includes my family. But at the same time, it doesn't, because it wasn't deemed that they had overdosed on pills. I think my Aunt Teresa would have come closest to actually being part of any statistic, because she did overdose on fentanyl. But it was an accidental overdose. And as a result of that overdose, she had a stroke. And I talk about that more in the book. But that's the problem. The statistics don't match the reality of why people are dying from opioids and these strong narcotics. What I can say is that I've seen a big shift in the medical industry. We don't prescribe them as often. We've tried to find workarounds with Tylenol and ibuprofen. We understand now the consequences of these very highly addictive drugs, and just the greediness of humanity. Man, some of the stories I heard. Some people made some money on those, some real money, and it just on the deaths of others. How do you get to that point in your life where that makes sense? But I'm honestly confused by a lot of things in life. I'm really confused about a lot of things in this country. I really struggle to understand most things. So me writing books like this is me attempting to understand the world around me, and I don't think my family had to die. I don't think they had to. I think they should all still be here. Maybe Grandma Jane, because she died when she was 72, but the rest of them, I think, it didn't have to go down the way it did. But it did, so here we are. Yeah, I'm going to stop rambling about this. Have your own thoughts, share comments, text me, message me, reply to the video, add your comments wherever you want. There's a podcast now. It's automatically transferring the audio that I have in the video to a podcast. And that's Accidental Memoir on Spotify. I'll figure out how to get it on YouTube and Apple Podcasts soon. Essentially, when I download it to Substack, the video, it takes the audio and moves it over for me. I don't have to do any extra steps. So if you want to listen to it via podcast, that's an option. If you want to watch it, it's on YouTube, it's on Substack, it's on my website, adiamondbooks.com. Comment anywhere you want. We can have a dialogue. You can tell me I'm completely wrong in everything, because I think, again, a lot of fact checking just needs to happen with this book. These are questions I want to know and understand. If you have those answers and you want to kindly share them without making me feel like an idiot, please feel free. Have a beautiful day. We will read the next chapter, chapter 4, next week.